It lands at roughly 5,070 words, inside the 4,805,200 window. A chain snapped tight and a dog lunged off the porch, all teeth and muscle. A boot skidded on the top step. A big man threw his arm up to guard his throat. The dog stopped an inch from his hand. Just stopped. Both of them breathing hard. Inside the little house, a spoon clinked against a bowl. A soft voice kept talking, low and gentle, like nothing outside mattered. The man on the step lowered his arm. He looked through the torn screen door and went still. He was 6'4", 300 pounds, a leather cut on his back that made grown men cross the street. Dutch Kowalski, president of his chapter. And right then, staring through that door, his hands started to shake. What did Dutch see in that house that made him cancel his own wedding 3 days later? Stay with me on this one. Now let me back this up a little, so you understand what kind of man was standing on that porch. Dutch Kowalski ran the biggest motorcycle club in the valley. 40 patched members. A clubhouse off the highway. A reputation that walked into a room a full minute before he did. When Dutch said sit, men sat. When Dutch said a debt was paid, it was paid. He'd built all of it with his own 2 hands, starting from nothing, starting from a kid nobody wanted. He didn't build it soft either. Men who owed Dutch money paid early just so they'd never see him on their doorstep. Men who tried him once, exactly once, told the story afterward the way you talk about a car crash you walked away from. That was the Dutch everybody knew. The Dutch on the patch. But here's the thing about a man like that. Everybody works for him. Nobody really knows him. And the one person who came closest wasn't a biker at all. Her name was Marisol Vega. She kept the club's books. Quiet woman, maybe 40, with tired eyes and a habit of saying thank you for things that didn't need thanking. She'd worked for Dutch 6 years. In 6 years, she never asked for a raise. Never called in sick. Never once put her hand out. She was the only person in that whole operation who told Dutch the truth. When a deal smelled wrong, she said so. When a member was skimming, she caught it in the numbers and told Dutch to his face, no matter how big he got. He trusted her more than his own brothers, and that scared him a little, if I'm honest. Trust was a thing Dutch handed out like it was coming off his own skin. And somehow this quiet woman had earned it without ever once seeming to try. Lately, though, something was off. Marisol had been leaving early, slipping out the side door at 4. Her checks were getting cashed the same day they cleared, every dollar gone. One of the guys made a crack about it. Said maybe she had a gambling problem. Said maybe she was into somebody for money. Said maybe the quiet ones are always hiding something, and laughed like he'd figured out the whole world. Dutch didn't believe it, but it sat in his chest and wouldn't leave. He'd seen good men go bad over a card table or a needle, and he'd learned everybody's got a crack in them somewhere. He hated that he was even thinking it about her. He hated more that he couldn't stop. So that morning, 3 days before his wedding, he did something he almost never did. He decided to surprise her. He pulled a fat envelope of cash out of the club safe, $5,000, a bonus, and he told himself he'd hand it to her in person. See her place. Make sure she was all right. That was all. And if there was trouble, some man leaning on her, some debt with teeth, well, Dutch was good at making trouble go away. Because the wedding was coming, you understand. Saturday. And Dutch Kowalski was marrying up. Her name was Brooke Danvers. 32, blonde, born into money out in the hills where the lawns never went brown. Her family owned car dealerships and a piece of a bank. She wore sunglasses that cost more than most men's motorcycles, and she looked at Dutch like he was a project she decided to finish. Everybody said Dutch had done well for himself. A rough man like that, landing a woman like that. The clubhouse was already decorated. The venue was a vineyard. Brooke had planned every inch of it, and she'd made one thing clear from the start. After the wedding, things were going to change. Dutch was going to be respectable now. Her word, not his. Respectable. He didn't love the word, but he loved the idea of a fresh start. A house with a real kitchen. A woman on his arm who made the country club crowd go quiet. Dutch had spent his whole life being the man people feared. Part of him wanted, just once, to be the man people admired. He was 50 years old and tired in a way sleep didn't fix, and Brooke had shown up like a door into some other life, and he'd walked toward it without asking too many questions. Maybe that was the mistake. So he climbed on his bike with the envelope in his cut and drove out to the east side of Fresno, to the address on Marisol's file. A street of small duplexes with chain-link fences and dead grass. Working people. His kind of people, truth be told, even now. He'd come from a street like this, and some part of him had never really left it. He killed the engine 2 houses down. And that's when he heard the dog. The porch had a dog on it. A pit bull chained to the rail thick through the chest, one ear chewed to a stub. Scars all down its side. The thing was on its feet the second Dutch's boot hit the sidewalk, low and rumbling, every muscle ready. Dutch stopped. Not because he was scared. Because he knew that dog. 2 winters back, his crew had found a pit bull half dead behind the clubhouse, dumped by some fighting ring, ribs showing, an ear torn clean. The guys wanted to put it down. Said it was too far gone, too mean, a lost cause. Dutch had said do what you want and walked away. He had a business to run, and no time for a broken animal. It was one of 100 small things he'd waved off in his life without a second look. And here it was. Alive. Chained to a rail on the east side of town, guarding a door like its life depended on what was behind it. Dutch took a step. The chain snapped tight. The dog lunged and Dutch threw his arm up, and the dog stopped an inch short and just held there, growling low. That's where you found us at the start of this story. Right there on that step. Then through the torn screen door, Dutch heard the voice. Marisol's voice. Soft, patient, saying, "Easy now, Diesel, easy. He's not gonna hurt anybody." And the dog, hearing its name, dropped its haunches and sat. Dutch didn't move. He looked through the screen into the little front room, and everything he thought he knew went quiet. Marisol was kneeling on the floor beside a narrow bed. On the bed lay an old man. Thin as a coat rack, white stubble, a face like cracked leather. His eyes were open, but they didn't track anything. They pointed at the ceiling and stayed there. The man was blind. And Marisol was feeding him, spoon by spoon, soup from a chipped bowl, wiping his chin with the corner of her sleeve between bites, talking to him the whole time like he was the most important person in the world. "There you go," she was saying. "There you go, Roy. Little more. You gotta keep your strength. Roy." Dutch felt the name go through him like cold water. He hadn't heard it in 25 years, but his body remembered it before his brain did. His knees went soft. His hand found the door frame. Because Dutch was 16 once. A runaway. Living in a garage behind an auto shop, sleeping on cardboard, stealing to eat. Nobody had ever run toward him in his life. His father had run the other way before Dutch could walk. His mother had a boyfriend with heavy hands, and one night Dutch climbed out a window and just kept going, and no one came looking. That was the world he knew. People left. People swung. You learned to be bigger and meaner than whatever was coming. And one night, a space heater tipped over and the whole garage went up while he slept. Dutch woke up choking, blind in the smoke, the door already a wall of fire. He remembered screaming. He remembered thinking, "This is it. This is how I go, and nobody's even gonna know my name." Then a hand closed around his ankle and dragged him out through the flames. A mechanic. An older man who'd stayed late that night, who ran back into a burning building for a kid he barely knew, and came out with his own arms cooked to the elbow. He wrapped Dutch in a blanket and sat with him on the curb while the sirens came, and he never let go of his shoulder, and he said, "You're gonna be somebody someday. I can tell." Nobody had ever said a thing like that to Dutch. Not once in 16 years. It was the first kindness he could remember. Dutch never even got his last name. Just Roy. He'd meant to go back, once he was on his feet, once he had something to give. But 16 turned into 20, and 20 turned into a patch and a bike and a war with another club. And by the time Dutch had the money and the means to find him, Roy had disappeared, the way poor men do. Dutch looked for a while. Made a couple calls. Then life got loud and he stopped. He told himself the man was probably dead. It was easier to carry a dead man than a debt you never paid. He wasn't dead. He was lying on a cot in a duplex on the east side, blind and helpless, being kept alive one spoonful at a time by a bookkeeper who'd never said a word about it to anyone. Dutch understood it all in about 4 seconds. The early clock outs. The cash checks, every dollar gone. Marisol wasn't gambling. She was carrying 2 lives on 1 paycheck. Feeding Roy. Feeding the dog nobody else would take. Paying for a nurse she couldn't afford. Buying the pills, the soup, month after month, and coming to work the next morning with those tired eyes. All that talk in the clubhouse about her secret. This was the secret. She was spending herself down to nothing on a man who could never pay her back and a dog that could never thank her, and she'd done it without a word. Because that's the kind of thing you don't say out loud. You just do it. Day after day, in a room nobody sees. The dog, Diesel, leaned against Dutch's knee. Just leaned. Put its scarred head against his leg and let out a long breath, like it had been waiting a long time for somebody to show up. Marisol looked over then and saw the huge shape filling her doorway. She froze. The spoon stopped halfway to Roy's mouth. For a second there was real fear in her face, the fear of a private thing being caught in the open. Then Dutch pulled the screen door gently the rest of the way open and stepped inside. And he didn't look angry, he looked wrecked, and she saw that too. She stood up slow. "Boss," she said, "I can explain." "You don't have to explain anything," Dutch said. His voice came out rough. "Who is he?" Marisol looked at Roy on the bed. "He was somebody's once," she said. "Somebody who ran into a fire for a kid and never got thanked. I found him in a shelter 2 years ago, going to die alone. I couldn't leave him there. That's all. I couldn't. Nobody should go out of this world with nobody holding on." Dutch's legs gave out, and he sat down hard on a kitchen chair that groaned under him. He looked at the old man's ruined arms, the burned scars gone silver with age, and he knew. Same arms. Same man. He didn't say it out loud. Not yet. He couldn't get the words up his throat. Marisol misread the silence for anger. She started apologizing fast, said she'd never let it touch her work. She'd pay back any hours, work weekends, whatever he wanted, the way people talk when they think they're about to lose the little they've got. Dutch held up one hand and she stopped. "Sit down," he said quietly. "Please. Just sit with me a minute." And she did. And for a while, nobody said anything at all. The old man breathed slow on his cot. The dog settled onto the floor between them with a grunt. Late morning light came in soft through the curtains, and the fear drained out of Marisol's shoulders, and Dutch felt something in his chest he hadn't felt in years. Peace. The room was poor and it was falling apart, but it was warm, and it was honest. And for a few minutes Dutch Kowalski, president, 300 pounds of feared man, just sat in it and let it hold him. He thought, "I'll fix this. Quiet. I'll get Roy a real nurse. I'll pay off Marisol's debts. I'll take the dog. Simple. Easy. Nobody has to know." He almost smiled. He reached down and scratched Diesel behind its stub of an ear, and the dog thumped its tail once against the floor. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Dutch felt like a man who was exactly where he was supposed to be. For about 90 seconds, Dutch believed the hard part was over. Then his phone buzzed in his cut. He pulled it out to silence it, and he saw the name on the screen. Brooke. He almost let it ring. But out of habit, he stepped back onto the porch to take it, thumbed it open, and put it to his ear. And Brooke was already talking. She wasn't talking to him. She'd called by accident with the phone in her purse, and she was mid-sentence, laughing that bright country club laugh, talking to somebody else in the room. And what Dutch heard through that little speaker stopped his heart. "Oh God," Brooke was saying. "No, the second those rings are on, it all goes. First thing Monday. That pathetic little bookkeeper he keeps around, Marisol whatever, gone. I've already got the papers drawn up. And the dog. Did I tell you, he wants to bring some filthy mutt to the house? A pit bull. In my house. Please. That thing is getting put down the day after the honeymoon, and he can cry about it all he wants." A pause. Another laugh, softer, meaner. "He's a big dumb animal himself, honestly," Brooke went on. "But he's a rich big dumb animal. And after the wedding the money's in both our names, and then, sweetie, then I run the zoo. He thinks he's marrying up. He has no idea. I'm going to strip that little kingdom of his down to the studs, and there is not one thing he can do about it once he signs. Daddy's lawyer already went through it. Airtight. Dutch stood on that porch with the phone against his ear, and the whole world tilted sideways. Now understand what just happened. A minute ago this was a story about a good man he wanted to save. A dog. A debt. Something he could fix quiet. Now it was something else. The woman he was going to marry in 3 days had just told him, in her own voice, that she planned to gut everything loyal in his life the second his name was on the paper. Marisol. Diesel. Roy, though she didn't even know Roy existed. All of it kindling for a fire she was already warming her hands over. And she'd brought a lawyer. This wasn't a bad mood or a cruel joke. It was a plan drawn up on paper waiting for a signature. This wasn't about the wedding anymore. This was about who Dutch was going to be for the rest of his life, and who he'd let get close enough to burn it all down. The fire that nearly killed him at 16 had come from a tipped-over heater, an accident, nobody's fault. This fire had a face and a manicure and a laugh, and it had been standing next to him for a year, smiling, measuring the drapes. He didn't yell into the phone. He didn't say a word. He very slowly took it away from his ear and he hung up, and he stood there breathing. And I want to stop right here for 1 second, because this is the part of the story that gets me. If you've ever had somebody show you who they really are right before you handed them everything, and something inside you woke up just in time, then you know exactly what Dutch felt on that porch. If this story is hitting you, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, because there is a lot more to it, and I promise you the ending is going to stay with you. All right. Back to Dutch on the porch. He put the phone in his pocket. He looked through the screen at Marisol, who was tucking a thin blanket up under Roy's chin, humming something under her breath. No idea her whole future had just been auctioned off by a stranger in the hills. And Dutch Kowalski made a decision. He walked back inside. Marisol looked up, and she must have seen something new in his face because she stood. I need to ask you something, Dutch said, and his voice was steady now, dead level. This man, Roy, did he ever tell you what he did before? For work. Mechanic, Marisol said. He was a mechanic, long time ago. Fixed cars. He talks about it sometimes when he's clear. Says he loved the smell of an engine. Says he pulled a boy out of a fire one time, and it was the best thing he ever did with his hands, and the worst thing, on account of what it cost him. Why? Dutch had to hold the back of the chair a second. He crossed the room. He knelt down beside the cot, this giant of a man folding himself down small next to a dying stranger, and he took the old man's scarred hand as gentle as he could. Roy, he said. Roy, can you hear me? The old man's clouded eyes drifted toward the sound. His lips moved. Who's that? He whispered. Big voice. You got a big voice, son. You pulled a kid out of a fire once, Dutch said. Garage behind a shop off Belmont. Long time ago. Kid was 16. You burned your arms up doing it. You remember that. Roy was quiet a long moment. Then something moved across that old face, something like light. Skinny kid, he said. Scared to death. Didn't even have shoes on. I told him. I told him he'd be somebody. I'm him, Dutch said. His voice broke right in half. I'm that kid. I never found you. I looked and I stopped looking and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm him. I'm the boy. I made it out and I made it big and I never came back for you. And I'm here now, I'm right here. The old man's hand tightened on Dutch's, weak but sure. Knew it, he breathed. Told you. Told you, didn't I? Behind them, Marisol had both hands pressed over her mouth. She'd carried this man for 2 years and never known the thread that tied him to the very man she worked for. 2 lives she'd been holding up, and they'd been the same story the whole time. She was crying without a sound. Dutch stayed on his knees a while. Then he stood up, and he wiped his face with the back of his hand, and he pulled out his phone. But he wasn't done being gentle, and he wasn't done being angry, and the two of those things together make a dangerous kind of calm. He made the first call to Tank, his road captain. Tank, he said. Hear me and don't ask questions. There's a house on the east side. I'm texting the address. I want 2 guys out here today with tools. The porch is coming off the frame. There's a leak in the roof. The whole place needs work. Done right, done fast, and every dollar comes out of my pocket, not the club's. You understand me? Good. Second call, to a woman named Della who ran home care for hospice patients, somebody the club had used when an old member was dying. Della, Dutch said. I've got a man needs round-the-clock nursing. Blind, bedridden, a veteran of the worst kind of life. Money is no object, you hear me, none. Best you've got. Start tomorrow morning. Send the bill to me. Third call. This one he made slower. He stepped out onto the broken porch, and Diesel followed him and sat against his leg, and Dutch dialed the vineyard. The wedding coordinator picked up all sunshine, Mr. Kowalski, so excited, just 3 days now. Cancel it, Dutch said. There was a stunned little silence. I'm sorry, she said. Cancel. Sir, we're 3 days out, the deposit's the. All of it, Dutch said. Cancel every piece of it. Keep the deposits, I don't care. There's no wedding. And when Brooke Danvers calls you screaming, and she will, you tell her the groom said 1 word. You tell her he said, respectable. She'll know what it means. She hung up. He stood there a second, breathing the warm afternoon. Then he made the last call himself, to Brooke, and this time she picked up on the first ring, all honey. Baby, she cooed, I was just thinking about you. Funny, Dutch said. I was just listening to you. The honey went out of her voice. What, she said. What are you talking about? You called me an hour ago, Dutch said. I picked up. You didn't notice. And I heard every word, Brooke. The bookkeeper. The papers you already had drawn up. The dog you were going to put down the day after the honeymoon. The zoo you were going to run. The big dumb animal you were going to strip down to the studs. Daddy's lawyer and all. Silence on the line. A long, guilty, scrambling silence. Dutch, she said finally, and her voice was different now. Careful, you misheard. I was joking, that wasn't. You want to know what you got wrong, Dutch said, and he wasn't loud. He was worse than loud, he was quiet. You had it backwards. You thought I was the big dumb animal marrying up. But the bookkeeper you were going to throw in the street. That woman spent 2 years, and every dollar she had keeping a dying old man alive out of nothing but kindness. And that old man, Brooke, that filthy business you don't care about. That old man ran into a fire and pulled me out of it when I was a kid. He's the reason I'm alive to be worth marrying. And that filthy mutt you were going to kill guarded his door every single night, so nobody could hurt him. He looked down at Diesel. The dog looked back up. Those three, Dutch said. The bookkeeper, the old man, and the dog. Those are the richest people I know. And you were going to be the poorest thing that ever walked into my life wearing a diamond. There's no wedding, Brooke. Don't call the guys. Don't call the club. Don't come to the vineyard. It's already canceled. Lose my number. He hung up before she could get a word out. And here's the thing. He didn't feel angry anymore. He felt light. Lighter than he'd felt in years. Like he'd just cut a stone off his own back that he'd been carrying so long he forgot it was there. He put the phone away and went back inside, and Marisol was standing in the middle of that little room looking at him like she didn't understand what was happening. "Boss," she said, "what did you just do?" "I quit being a fool," Dutch said. "Sit down. We got a lot to talk about. Now let me tell you how it all landed, because this is where the story finds its meaning." By the end of that week, the duplex didn't look like the same house. Dutch's crew tore the rotten porch off and built a new one, wide and solid, with a ramp so Roy's cot could be wheeled out into the sun. They fixed the roof. They painted the whole place. They built a real doghouse for Diesel, though the dog never used it, because Diesel slept by Roy's bed every night from then on and wasn't about to change. Della the nurse showed up the next morning and never left. Roy got clean sheets, real medicine, a mattress that didn't hurt his back. He got stronger for a while, the way people do when somebody finally comes. He'd sit out on that new porch in the afternoons with his blind eyes turned toward the warmth, and Dutch came by most days after that, this enormous man in a leather cut, and he'd sit on the step and just talk to the old mechanic about engines, about carburetors and timing belts, and the way a good motor sounds. Roy loved it. It was the happiest anybody had seen him. And Marisol. Dutch called her into the clubhouse office the following Monday, the same Monday Brooke had planned to throw her out on the street. He slid a paper across the desk, and Marisol's hands shook when she picked it up, because after everything she still half expected to be fired. It wasn't a firing. It was a partnership. Dutch had made her part owner of the club's legitimate business, the garage, the two shops, the whole clean side of the operation. "Your name on the door," he said. "You've been the only honest hand on this thing for 6 years. Time it was really yours too. And I'm covering Roy's care to the end, every cent, so you keep your paychecks from now on. Buy yourself something. You've earned about 100 years of something." Marisol didn't have any words. She just cried, and then she laughed, and then she cried again. And Dutch, who scared grown men across the street, got up and hugged her careful like she might break and said, "Thank you. For all of it. You saved a better man than you'll ever know." Brooke tried, of course. She called. She sent lawyers sniffing around to see if there was a ring or a promise she could squeeze money out of. There wasn't. There'd never been a joint account, because Marisol, the careful bookkeeper, had quietly made sure of that months before, though nobody ever asked her to. Brooke went back to the hills and married somebody else inside a year, some man with a dealership, and the valley forgot her fast. That's the thing about people like Brooke. They think they're the center of the story. They're not even in it. Roy passed the following spring. In his sleep, on the porch, in the afternoon sun, with the dog beside him and Marisol holding one hand and Dutch holding the other. He wasn't afraid and he wasn't alone, and for a man who'd spent his life giving everything away and getting nothing back, that was the whole world. His last clear words a few days before were to Dutch. "Told you," he said. "Told you you'd be somebody." And Dutch said, "You were wrong about one thing, old man. You were the somebody. I just got to stand near you." They buried him proper. 40 motorcycles rode behind the hearse, engines rumbling low down the highway, because Dutch told the club that the man in that box had once done a braver thing than any patch on any back, and every one of them showed up. And Diesel, that scarred, chewed-up dog that everybody wrote off as a lost cause. Dutch took him home. The mean, broken animal nobody wanted rode in the sidecar of the president's bike from then on, ears back in the wind, and grew old, fat, and happy on a couch he was absolutely not allowed on and slept on every single night. Sometimes, on a warm evening, Dutch would sit out on his own porch with that dog's scarred head against his knee, the same way it had leaned against him through a torn screen door on the day everything changed. And he'd think about how close he came, how he almost married the fire instead of the man who pulled him out of it, how the quietest person in his whole life, a bookkeeper who never once put her hand out, had been the richest soul he ever knew, and he'd nearly walked right past her. A fist can start a story. So can a fire. But it turns out the thing that saved Dutch Kowalski wasn't his fists, and it wasn't his club, and it wasn't his money. It was a bowl of soup, spooned out slow by somebody who thought nobody was watching. And I'd like to think that's true for more of us than we know. That somewhere out there, quiet and unthanked, somebody's keeping us alive one spoonful at a time. Stay kind out there. You never know whose door you're guarding.